Ladies and gentlemen, I've now said so many times that before this particular dialogue last week, everybody else was chipping into workshops, into discussions on the single issues that we're bringing together today. And the issue of capital markets, institutions and distributional effects brackets towards ambitious climate policy for low and middle income countries was organized by the team of Dr. Waldemar Marz from the IFO Institute and Dr. Jan Steckel of the Mercator Research Institute on Global Commons and Climate Change, MCC for short. Now, Jan, give us the synopsis. What actually happened during that workshop? What studies did you look at, and what was the outcome?
Thank you very much, Connie. I would like to summarize this event by actually stating the three challenges that we have identified. So the first challenge for low and middle income countries to engage in climate policy certainly is government capacity. So putting forward climate policy, it requires statecraft, it requires regulation, but it also requires the capacity to deal with the various impacts on parts of the population, on the industry, etc. That is in part social policy. The second, and we have heard this by Adam and Laurence already, is the access to technology and capital. So one great challenge that was identified is the fact that renewable energy, for example, are much more capital intensive on a per megawatt basis. And at the same time, we deal with high capital costs generally in low and middle income countries. Those high capital costs, however, hurt or hit the renewable energies much harder than their fossil counterparts, where large parts of the costs only occur in the future, whereas for renewable energy, we need to mobilize the capital upfront and today. So for renewable energies and alternatives to fossils to be competitive today, we need to lower capital costs. We need to see stable policy environments and additional human and technology skills. But this is not the only thing. Last but not least, we often hear about the co-benefits of renewables, which are for sure important with respect to health, but we must not forget that also fossils hold some spillovers, for example, on industrialization, which for low and middle income countries is of course a huge societal goal. And this brings me to my third point. Which is the high prevalence of other development goals and the general reluctance to see that climate change mitigation might be necessary also in low and middle income countries. However, at the same time, we see that it is exactly those countries that are currently carbonizing, that invest into fossil fuel infrastructure, that can not only challenge the climate targets, but also lead to stranded assets in the short to medium run. So it is important, and this is one of the key outcomes, to frame climate change mitigation in low and middle income countries also as a development issues that can first alleviate impacts and second also strengthen other sustainable development goals.
So that sounds like your advice would be a many-pronged attack, not one size fits all, depending, of course, on the capability of the countries themselves. Now, did you find in your studies, and maybe discuss in the workshop, that the countries that were more hit already by the climate change effects were ones that were looking towards greener technology more than others, or did that not have any correlation?
Not necessarily. I mean, most countries, most governments are well aware of the vulnerabilities, but you have to see that there's a ranking, an implicit ranking of governmental or societal objectives. And in poor countries, the prime objective is, of course, to get out of poverty, to get access to clean electricity, to reliable electricity. And like the environmental damages, for example, that might be related to that only occur in the future. And this is, of course, a huge challenge. The countries' policymakers generally know that they are very vulnerable, but they also know that they need to deliver on these other sustainable development goals.
Thank you very much for that very concise input.